You know how we say we want our viejitos to die with dignity? Her time is coming soon, and I want her to die with dignity. I'm keeping to her plans. I'm giving her more love. This is why I'm here. Who was gonna hug her? Who was gonna wipe her butt? Who was gonna wipe her tears? Who was gonna be there?
There's a weight that many in our community carry silently, a weight that comes from the love and responsibility of caring for our aging parents. It's a role filled with sacrifice, but one that often upends our lives in ways we're not prepared for. Today on Fritanga, we're diving into the realities of caregiving in Latino families, that emotional, mental, and financial strain that it brings, and the impact that it has on every aspect of our daily lives.
It was like caring for a child. And like when caring for a child, your heart just opens up in a different way that you didn't know it could.
Sometimes I think she's the one who's going to bury me, because the weight of caring, at times, it's the care that at times forgets to know that we also need to take care of ourselves.
In our cultura, caregiving is often not a choice but a commitment, a deeply rooted value of family, respect, and unconditional love, but often we have to resolve lifelong issues and sometimes generational issues in a matter of months before someone we love passes or someone we love is in the most vulnerable state, where we actually as children become the parents and the parents become the children. How do we manage the stress? It can be overwhelming. How do we navigate the hidden cost of caregiving, the emotional, the financial, and in our relationships we have with others? It bleeds over into everything because familia is everything in our community. Today, with AARP, we'll explore practical solutions, resources to help plan for aging, managing finances, and protecting dignity as our loved ones grow older. Joining us for this conversation is Yvette Peña, Vice President of Audience Strategy at AARP. Adrian Gaston Garcia, a queer Latine storyteller, and Alejandra Castillo, who is not only one of my best friends, but someone that I've walked alongside for over 3 decades. She is also a fellow in residence at the Harvard Kennedy School Institute for Politics. Today's conversation is for anyone who's felt the weight of caregiving and who wants to prepare for what's ahead. Let's make sure that in caring for our loved ones, we're also taking care of ourselves. Now let's Fritanga.
So I am going to start by just saying, I am dealing with this as well as all of you. And I remember having these conversations with all of you as a support system and as a way of kind of releasing some of that tension, some of that guilt that's associated with this. And I lost my mom 27 years ago. And I will never forget looking out at that church and seeing Alejandra Castillo walk in. Those are things that bind you for the rest of your lives. And now I know, Alejandra, you're dealing with being a caretaker. I know when your mom had a stroke that many of us were caregiving along with you because we love you so much. And Yvette, I know you're going through something with your mom that has recent changes that you're dealing with every single minute of every single day and all the complexities associated with it. And Adrian, you just lost your papi recently, and your perspective is going to be different as well. I mean, because these are all like regional, and these are all, the intersectionality has a lot to do with it, and that acceptance and the intergenerational part of it, that people might have a different way of addressing issues of family dynamics, and then we have to deal with it where we're now taking care of someone that at some point it was complicated in terms of our relationships, and you have to figure all that stuff out. And I'm dealing with my dad, my papa, who is in Nicaragua, which is a whole different dynamic to have to be a caregiver for someone that is very far away, and I can't go back to my birthplace to be with him because of the political situation. So let me start with Alejandra. ¿Cómo está tu mamá?
Thank you for asking. Mom is doing incredibly well. And here's the interesting thing. Sometimes I think I love her dearly, but sometimes I think she's the one who's going to bury me, because the weight of caring at times, it's the care that at times forgets to know that we also need to take care of ourselves. But, we love our parents. We'll do anything for our parents. That's in our DNA, our cultural DNA. But I think this conversation is very timely, and one that I have to say I am now taking a different look at what caregiving is about and what we need as well.
And I know your situation, Alejandra, because it also brought elements of your family together to take care of your mom. And so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm sure Yvette can attest to this. And no offense, guys, we love you. But when it comes to the Latino community, so much of our tradition has always been on the shoulders of women. And I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest and the only daughter. So since my father died when I was 13, I feel like, I didn't have a mom. I had a spouse. And now I have somebody who is reminiscent of a child who I have to make sure that she doesn't trip and fall, that I'm holding her hand when we cross the street, that she's taking her medicines, that she's eating well. So in some ways, not too long ago, I also called my brothers and said, okay, guys, it's time for all of us to be part of it. And to my amazement, they've done an incredible job, because I took a step back and I was able to say, now, how are we going to do this division of labor? And I have to say, I'm very proud of my brothers.
And that's not an easy thing to do, especially when you've counted on yourself all these years. And look, I remember telling Adrian this too, because a lot of this fell on him with his dad. When my mom died, shout out Maria, my sister, who took the brunt of it on. My brother went one direction, I went another direction, and she really carried us during that time, because it's complicated what happens after they're a caretaker. And I was just wrestling with that feeling of relief, which is a strange thing when your parent dies and you don't want that to happen. But then when it does, and you're just like, oh my goodness, you're fighting this inner feeling of feeling like a sense of relief. But at the same time, you're mourning, and then all of a sudden you have to become an accountant and everything else. Yvette, talk about your current situation with your mommy.
Yes, mommy's taken a turn for the worse at this time. Alejandra, I don't think you know this yet, because I haven't been able to connect with you because there's so much is going on. But she has end-stage kidney failure. So it's stage 5 kidney failure, and she decided she didn't want dialysis. And I was upset at her because of it, and I spoke to the doctors, and they said, her quality of life wouldn't have been any better with a dialysis, because it's irreversible at this time. But she had early onset dementia, but having the toxicity in her body has really accelerated the dementia. Like today, I received 5 phone calls because I was there this weekend, and she is accusing me of stealing some papers. Her mental decline just isn't there. It's very bad. I've been navigating hospital systems and insurances for the past all as soon as Hispanic Heritage Month kicked off. That's why I haven't been around. And it's been very difficult. I felt very alone. All of my cousins caregive for their own mothers. And so I did an Alejandra. I texted my brother, who has been estranged from the family for 35 years.
Wow.
I didn't know how to contact my father. I contacted an aunt from my Santana family side, and I said, tell my father to contact me. I've had the same number for 19 years. And my father left me at the altar. So you know how hard it had to be for me to connect with my father after 19 years. But you have to find support, right? As a caregiver, you have to form a team, and you have to find support. And sometimes you need blood, close. You can't have friends, and mis primos, I love them to death, but they have their own things. And so I contacted them because I cannot do this alone. I mean, I've already started to make funeral plans. It's very difficult and very emotional. Alejandra knows how close I am to my mom. And I couldn't take it by myself. I couldn't do it alone. And so I'm thankful to God that has given me strength to have been able to call Alexi, my brother, and my father. But the situation is very bad. I was just there this weekend because I haven't been able to get home attending weekend service, so I go on the weekends because she fell and she was in the hospital and she had COVID, and it's been like a roller coaster ride. And so, you know how we say we want our viejitos to die with dignity? Her time is coming soon, and I want her to die with dignity. I'm keeping to her plans. I'm giving her more love. This weekend I recall holding her hand y la acaricié y le dije, mami, estoy aquí porque te quiero. Because she fights me. She attacked me a couple of years ago. I didn't realize it was the dementia. And it's all about love. You got to tell them you love them. And my cousin told me hug her, touch her back, give her love. But I will tell you, it's a very, very difficult situation because my mom has been the only parent that I have known, you know, since I was a teenager. And the deterioration is every single day, and it's hard. But like Alejandra, I knew Alejandra, you got to take a breath and say, I can't do this alone. I have a brother, right? And I'm going to tell you, I feel Tony and Alejandra and Adrian, like a weight has been lifted off of my shoulders because now Alexi's there with her now in the house.
So he stepped up, Yvette?
He has stepped up, and I didn't think he would, but he did. I said, if you want to enjoy your mom, don't cry at her funeral. Give her flowers now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of times too, Yvette and Alejandra and Adrian, you almost have to give someone the opportunity to step up where they may not feel comfortable. And you believing in them, you're giving them that confidence and that feeling of responsibility that they may not have had before. So I applaud both of you for two of the strongest women I know for allowing someone to help you. And Adrian, can you talk a little bit about your dad? Because I remember when we were on the plane flying back from Chicago, I think, and I think you're from Chicago.
Yep.
And you were talking about your dad had recently passed.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how a lot of the responsibilities fell on you, the way it did on my sister, for instance, when my mom died, but also that the first thing you said, which is classic you, is I need to put a checklist together in terms of what people are going to have to deal with, because there's a financial piece to it. There's just an actual inventory that you're doing in someone's home, and their whole lives are suddenly being boxed up. And then you've got to deal with the emotional part of it. And you're not even allowed to grieve until you get through all of these other things.
Yeah. No, I feel like this is so timely. Yvette, I just want to appreciate everything that you shared and acknowledge how brave it is to ask for help, because I think that there's a lot of courage in that. And hearing your story, it just resonated a lot with mine. I had, my dad was diagnosed with like all different types of cancer. He was sick with all these different, medical conditions, and it was until he was diagnosed with liver cancer that we knew that he had about 6 to 12 months left. And I was there when we got the news. And it was just me and him. And it was then that I made the decision to go back and forth to Chicago. So I could completely empathize as much as I can with what you're going through, because it's hard to figure out what is the life that you're living and how to balance it all. As Tony kind of mentioned, I didn't have the best of relationships with my father. He was very necio, very misogynist, very, very abusive at times. And there was a decision that I made as an adult where I distanced myself from him, and I kind of realized that like he was not going to be part of my life. And then the pandemic happened, and he was getting older, and so was my mom. And when he started getting sick, it just, like life, it complicated our relationship even more. And being able to go back and forth and care for him, I just saw a completely different side of him. He also had dementia, so similarly, those hard conversations that we wanted to have, they just couldn't happen, right? And I had to accept that. And one of my really good friends, and I offer this up to you out of love, told me that the only things that you really can't say is, I love you and thank you. And those were the extent of our conversations together. But I saw this different side to this human being that I realized that my dad was never really offered love as a child. So the expectation that I wanted from him to love me the way that I wanted to be loved was just something that he didn't know how to do, right? And I became very compassionate during those times. And it was a hard decision going back and forth. I saw my mother and my brother were his primary caretakers, and I saw the stress that they were going through. Luckily, I work for this amazing organization that understands the value of family, and I've been there for over like 10 years. So I had enough PTO to kind of be able to do it. And they extended me enough grace to give me time off. But I was really thankful because I got to spend, his last 4 weeks with him. Right. And that was a gift, that I didn't realize at the time, but, it was really interesting because it was like caring for a child. And like when caring for a child, your heart just opens up in a different way that you didn't know it could. And yeah, like it was hard. It was challenging. It manifested itself in a lot of stress, physically as well. The toll that my body was taking to like fly and sleep on a sofa and wake up every 4 hours to administer morphine. And one of the hardest things that we had to decide as a family was, since he had this dementia and we knew about his life expectancy, we didn't tell him that he was dying. In his mind, he was going to eventually be able to go back to Mexico and like visit. But after conversations with doctors, we knew that if we were to tell him, it'd be a conversation that we would have to have over and over and over again. And it would just be hard, right? So we opted not to. We just opted to provide him with the best care. And one thing that really stood out for me was when we would have the nurses come in. It was just so fascinating. They would tell us that the same way that the body knows how to prepare for life, like as a baby is being born and they grasp their first air, they also know how to prepare for death. So actively seeing my dad like die was just also like a mind blow a bit, because his body was telling us that he was ready. Like his head was was holding on as hard as he could. And we would have a lot of conversations about providing him the opportunities to let go. And it was actually this beautiful moment where I asked my mom and my brother to leave the window open and let's all exit the house and leave him by himself. And my mom did this beautiful like ceremony and prayer and said that she forgave him and let him go. And then when we went out for like a 15-minute walk, and when we came back that same night, that's when my dad passed.
Can you share a little bit about how you have an outlet for this, which I think is the remarkable thing about you being an artist and a storyteller? I remember when you did one of our Hispanic Heritage Foundation charlas, you talked about your dad through the poem Manos, where you took different aspects of the loteria cards and would riff around it. I was floored by the emotion and the description and the complexity of that 3-minute piece that you did. And you talked about your dad in such vivid description of his hands.
Yeah, no, I think storytelling, my dad was a storyteller. Like one of my favorite things about him before the dementia really kicked in is I would just ask him to tell me stories, and we would spend our time together doing that, and just hearing him remember some of his fondest memories was just so beautiful. And he always knew how to like captivate a room and always knew how to make people laugh or cry. Like, you know, he was both a good man and also a complicated man. I want to honor him with both. He was completely human. But with me and storytelling, I feel like it allows me the outlet to talk about things in a very vulnerable way that finds some of the extraordinary in the ordinary. My dad was always obsessed with his hands and always talked about the importance of having rough and callous hands and what that meant as being a man, a hardworking man, and like earning your keep and having value assigned to you. And I wrote this other poem about cutting his fingernails because he wasn't able to cut his fingernails. And like now I was touching his soft hands and thinking about the difference between who he is now and who he was then. And is this the same person? And it was something really fascinating because the same way that I grow, and I'm not the same person that I was yesterday, the image of my father also changed, that he also changed, right? And here was this very sweet and soft man that kind of reflected his hands. And it was just this, we had a lot of very tender moments towards the end that just really helped bring our relationship full circle. It was the healing that I needed. It wasn't the one that I wanted, but it was part of the healing that I needed for sure.
But it's important to be able to do that, to be able to box certain parts of their life up, put a label on it, put it on a shelf, and what's this other box filled with, and what's this other box, and to be able to fill that last one in a way that you're able to resolve it a little more, even if it's within yourself. And they're not aware, because if you gave a lie detector to half our parents, they're going to say I was the greatest parent in the world, and they would pass. But you really do have to do that. And in terms of this is inevitable for all of us, right? For our parents and then for us. And Bob Dylan once, I remember this song he had that said, "Those who are not busy being born are busy dying." And it really captures the life cycle. I have to say that with my dad, he's in Nicaragua. He is 94 years old. Alejandra knows him. And I would often, ¿Cómo está la Dominicana? And then I would conference call Alejandra. She would always jump on and they would talk politics and often gang up on me. But I have the benefit that my dad's brain is still completely intact in his memory, and it's slowed down a little bit, but he's 94 years old. He's in a wheelchair, y está cieguito, but his mind's intact. And that I remember when my mom was dying, that she was dying of cancer, and it was in her 50s, early 50s. So that is such a huge gap in terms of both your parents dying, and when you outlive your parents, that's a whole nother thing that I know Alejandra's dealt with, with her dad. But I just remember just my mom not wanting to quit and fighting every single day. And I wrote a piece that I'll share with you at some point, Adrian, about she was like a Latino boxer. They just don't know when to quit because they always feel like they can still land one more punch, even if it's 1 second left, to be able to win this fight. And it was very, very hard to see her so debilitated. But yet you hang on to some of these moments that you shared. And so every 4th of July, when I think of my mom, we became citizens at the same time. I was I think I was like 29 or 30 years old. She was older, in her, I was going to say early 50s or something, just before she died. And she would wrap herself in the flag and put on this crazy red, white, and blue hat and go down to the mall. And because she felt American, right? And she would tell me, that you've been raised here. It's different. But we have a greater sense of responsibility, should have a greater sense of pride in being an American, because we weren't born into this. And so it was just remarkable that I remember on 4th of July, we were all going to go down to the mall with my friends and I. And I stopped off to say goodnight to my mom, who at that point was towards the end before she went into hospital and then went into hospice. And she was laying in her bed with all the apparatus on to help her breathe. And I just said Happy 4th of July, and she said, "Are you going out with your friends?" And I said, "Yes, they're all downstairs waiting for me." And I don't know what made me do it, but I said, "You know what, Mommy, I'm going to stay here with you." And I crawled into bed next to her, and put my arm around her and watched the 4th of July. To this day, every 4th of July, I get emotional thinking about that moment that I didn't let pass. And in my life, and Alejandra knows this better than anyone, but I think all of you do, I don't let any moments pass. And that's for better or for worse, because it also means we take on a lot. We have a hard time saying no. Well, there's a reason we have a hard time saying no. We don't want to miss out on something. And that was a moment where I didn't miss out a special moment with my mom. So every 4th of July, I think about my mom's pride, laying in bed with her, watching the fireworks on TV instead of going downtown and seeing them, because I was able to share one more. And same with the cherry blossoms. That was how she felt American when she first came from Paraguay and Nicaragua to the United States. And so now every year I pay tribute to her. And her last wish before she died, we took her out of the hospital and she had all the stuff on and took her to see the cherry blossoms one more time. So it's a very emotional and almost spiritual moment that I share with the memory of my mom every cherry blossom season. And I'm wondering, what are some of those moments that you all will remember? Because with my dad, it's going to be the World Series. And for him to live through one more World Series, which is real close to happening over the next few weeks, is remarkable. And he always said to me, I'd say, "Papá, ¿cómo te sientes?" "Bueno, estoy en extra innings y siguen los innings, porque lo lindo de béisbol es el juego nunca termina hasta el último out. Y todavía no estoy en mi último out." And so I know baseball will be my way of sharing those moments with my dad when he passes. But talk to me a little bit about those memories that you'll hang on to with your parents.
I think for me, it'll be her birthday. Her birthday is December 8th, and it's the day of the Immaculate Conception.
La Purísima.
La Purísima. Ella se llama Dilcia María. That's why she's María. And she loves to party. She loves to dance. She loves to celebrate. And so I always make sure that December 8th, no matter where I am, if I'm not able to go, she has her flowers, that people go and visit her. They take a cake. And I remember celebrating her 60th birthday. It was just one that I felt she just kept talking about it, and we celebrated it. And the pictures and the memories that we got is before some of my aunts got dementia and Alzheimer's. And she was happy and she danced, and she's a very strong character, and she's not very thankful. She's not very grateful. But I think that day will live in her life, in her memory, in her life forever and ever. And the pictures that I have, I think are the pictures that show the most joy on her face. And so I don't know if that day La Virgencita blessed us because she was in a good mood. Y bailó y cantó, and she wanted to cut her cake, and she sang to herself, and we have the videos. But December 8th, no matter where I am in the world, will always be my Mami Dilicia's birthday.
How about you, Alejandra?
Well, I have the fortune that my mom is thankfully very very healthy and alive. But both of you, all of you, I should say, said some very powerful pearls of wisdom about being the process that we're in, understanding that our parents are now, at a point where we have to give them grace and forgiveness and understanding, because when we do, we realize their journey has been really, really difficult. I mean, we can say our journey has been difficult, but it pales in comparison to our parents. Their immigrant stories of not being loved, of trauma. We have to acknowledge, and I want to call it out, Tony, our culture has a lot of trauma. Children go through a lot. It's not that, poverty hits us all in very different ways. And when I look at my mother, I think her secret power is that my mother lets everything roll. And it angers me sometimes because I wish she held on to a little bit more like, I keep count. But my mother lets everything roll, and that's been her secret of her joy, and the secret of her longevity, as well as the secret of understanding life. Like, there's no point in holding on to these emotions that really poison us. So what I have learned from my mother is, my grandmother used to say, "Échale agua al vino." And I would get upset with my grandmother because she too had that same superpower. And it meant you pour water into the wine to the point where the wine is no longer, it doesn't impact you, it doesn't inebriate you, it doesn't. And that's what I've learned from my mother, and what I'll hold on and treasure from her.
How about with your papi?
Oof, now you're opening some doors there.
I just
want
right. to acknowledge that, this is also kind of a, look, at some point we're going to be orphans.
Oof,
if we outlive her. And that's a heavy thing.
Yeah. And the reason I say are you opening up some doors because, as you know, and I share it, my father committed suicide. What I learned from my father is that our culture can also, particularly when you're the firstborn, there's a lot of responsibility. You have to set the stage. No hagas pasar vergüenza a la familia. Like, it's always about pride and success. And what I learned from my father, particularly given his choice, was that in life you have to bend. When you're so strict and you're by the rule and by the book, and it's wonderful, but it's not practical. And the more rigid you are with your beliefs and your upbringing and your pride, when life throws you those curveballs, no pun intended, Tony, continuing the baseball metaphor, when life throws you those baseballs, those fastballs and curveballs, you have to bend. You have to go with the flow. Hence, again, why my mother's superpower is the fact that she lets everything roll. But my father taught me a lot. And again, I think when I look at his own passing, it was a lot of mental health issues. We disguise mental health in many different ways. Addiction is a big thing. And my father was a workaholic, literally a workaholic. And in many ways, I am too. So I have to remind myself of how we as a culture need to process mental health. We can't hide away and bury ourselves. So, what I learned also is to allow people the opportunity to fulfill their journey in life, and to honor their decisions. And Yvette, you said it, your mom made a decision. It may not have been the one you wanted, but it's her right to make the decision.
Absolutely.
Just like my father's, I never wanted him to have done that, but I had to give him space and honor, because that's the only way we can process through it.
One thing that you said, Alejandra, that stood out to me is like one of the reasons why I really started writing was because I saw my dad's relationship to work and how work and his career became such a central piece in his identity that I am still trying to unlearn how to do that. And that's why my writing is kind of like my escape to do something that really helps redefine me outside of like my career. And it's hard, especially in DC where I'm based at. Like, a lot of people just really have identified with that. But I saw my dad die, and it didn't matter that he was a businessman. It didn't, like all that stuff that, we hold on to and we find value in. And with his death, it also brought up, what is the legacy that I want to leave behind? Like, do I want things to roll off my back? Do I want to, be the workaholic and be type A and control of everything? Or do I want to write stories that really help, talk about stuff that is hard to talk about? But going back to your question, Tony, I just wanted to acknowledge that, Alejandra, because that really resonated with me. But it's a recent memory, but during the last few weeks, what was hard is that like my dad was only awake for like 4 hours out of the day, right? So like similar event, like I would spend time with him, and then I would just plan his funeral like for the rest of the rest of the day, or like do like like all sorts of other planning as we were trying to prepare. And it was, it was hard to like maintain these two things, but like I knew I needed time off of work. But the moment that he was awake, we would sit together in the living room, and he was obsessed with Los Bukis, the 80s, Mexican rock-ish ballad band. And we would play music videos for him on YouTube because there's only so much TV that he would be able to do. And looking at those like old 80s and 90s music videos just brought him so much joy. And it really clicked for him. So he was able to like identify Marco Antonio Solis. He was able to identify, other videos that we played, like Olga Tañón. Like it was like other people and music. He was able to help identify that. So it brought like a spark in him, and he really loved music. So it was really nice just to be able to watch these old music videos that I hadn't seen in probably like, I don't know, like 20 years and just be able to like spend time with him and do that together, because it just felt like it excited him in a way and brought life back into him in a way that, was very endearing the last few weeks. Leading up to his death, when he was actually in bed rest and was not moving and not waking up and just on morphine. During the night, like I didn't want him to feel alone, so I created a playlist on Spotify with all his favorite songs, and I would just play it for him throughout the middle of the night. And then I also asked my friends and loved ones and family to submit songs too of loved ones who had passed and crossed over. So that way, when my dad eventually would cross over, he would have a community waiting for him on the other side. Because I think, he held on for a very long time. And I've come to realize, I think he was just scared of letting go. And he was scared of like what was on the other side and having to face, whatever judgment or whatever his understanding was. And I wanted to kind of to ease that. And, music was the thing that really brought him happiness. And I still listen to the playlist, and it has some pretty good songs. So I'll share it with you, Yvette and Alejandra too, so that way y'all can have it.
Yes,
please.
We should put a playlist, and Antonio can, Caro, who's the producer of the Fritanga, can put a playlist together that we can share with people of music that our parents love. My mom was from Paraguay, which has been voted the most musical country at some point in the world. And so, when I hear harp music, it immediately makes me think of my mom. And my dad always loved music as well, including the Platters and Nat King Cole and some of those. So it all brings back some of these memories. But
Tony, before you transition, can I just make another point to go back to something we talked very briefly about? When you bring in your community, it surprises you the tools that they bring with them. My brother David is really incredible, because on Saturdays and Sundays he puts on the radio for my mother of old music, and my mother spends the entire weekend, remembering, and she knows word for word songs from 50, 60 years ago. She remembers them like that, and it's really remarkable, because it's like a mental memory exercise for her.
yeah.
And I would have never thought of that. And he did it, and it's now become a tradition. Now I join in as well. But the power of music, both while we live and of our loved ones, is just the most healing thing ever. So I'm glad that we brought up the conversation on music.
Yeah, and I work at AARP, and one of our biggest pillars is brain health. And the way we talk about brain health is music and brain health. Because when my aunts who have Alzheimer's and dementia get together, and Alejandra, cuando le ponen a Rafael Solano, one of the old school Dominican artists, they all sing. The aunt that doesn't open her eyes, she sings. And she doesn't recognize people. But the music is healing. And it's therapeutic, and I'm also going to tell you who it's therapeutic for us as caregivers. Because you can put on songs and you can make a playlist, and they can bring back memories, they can calm you, they can be used in meditation. So Alejandra, I am so happy that you mentioned that. This weekend when I was with my mom, she was in a very, very bad place. She was dark. And besides me telling her I love her, I got to show you something that happened. I have to share this because you're not going to believe it. Look at this.
Oh.
You know why that happened? Because I was putting the music channels and Gilberto Santa Rosa came on. She jumped up from her bed, put on her slippers, and she started dancing. She had COVID. And she took off her mask and she says, I want you to film this. I was terrified because I was like, film it, what's going on? Where you going, lady? Where you going, right? But yeah, music. So you need to share that playlist. And I love your idea, Tony, of us all doing one because we can all use it.
Yeah, and I have to share with you, Yvette, that really hit me just now because I have pictures before we had iPhones when my mom was dying because it was almost 30 years ago of her dancing, and she had the wig on, she was emaciated, but she was dancing and showing me like how she used to dance when she was a young beauty queen in Paraguay. And it's a lasting memory, and I think I posted about it on social media at one point in remembering her passing or her birthday, one of the two. And it's that basically the same thing. So dance also along with it, and we'll do the spirit of this podcast is how culture comforts. And so at the end of it, I'm going to ask you all questions on how culture comforts us. But dance certainly is one of them. Music, food, all of these different smells that we have as part of our memories. But I have to say on the music part, we all react differently. It can paralyze me if I hear a song that reminds me of my mom or makes me think of my dad. Like, it really does. And so it can work both ways. It can warm you. To me, it actually kind of paralyzes me in grief for a moment because of the effect that it can have to uplift you or to just make you really like triggers you to what you went through when they passed. So it's interesting how all that works. And the other thing that can also send you into a certain place that I want to talk about is expectations that we create on ourselves through our parents or that our parents thrust onto us. And I don't mean just in terms of career. I mean other expectations in terms of what they expect from us as parents. And part of that is ni de aquí ni de allá, in terms of the cultural part of it. And I know a lot of different groups of people have to wrestle with that. And then there's the guilt that, again, they may lob it at us, but we have to accept it and catch it in order to feel guilty. So can we talk about the realities of dealing with caretaking for our family members as they get older or the passing and everything that goes along with that? We were just talking a second ago about having that sense of relief that can then produce so much guilt. And so, Adrian, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah. So my parents had me when they were older, and I'm the youngest of four. I used to say I was the oops baby, but now I'm saying I'm the miracle baby because me and my brother are 11 months apart. I was completely unplanned. They never made any excuse to say otherwise. But I'm the miracle child. So like I was dealing with this like alone because a lot of my friends and my community had not experienced, the loss of family. So I was navigating it by myself for a very long time. And I kind of, I don't know, Yvette or Alejandra, how you do it, but I was like, okay, well, this is like my Chicago life of like taking care of my dad, and then this is DC, my real life of like what is really going on. And then it took me like months of going between them two and realize I'm like, oh no, this is my new normal. This is life. Like it's not either or. It's both. It's yes and. When I kind of like released myself of the expectation that I had to like be perfect and like try to hold on to everything, and where I also like release myself of the expectation of like, oh, don't talk about this because it makes other people awkward. Like I was all about, there came a point where like I started writing about it and started like reciting my poetry and also like being really frank with my friends, and it just lifted up so many more, like it opened up so many doors. Even when I'd be at like poetry readings and just sharing something, the amount of times that people would come up afterwards and be like, you know, my father passed or my grandmother passed or someone, like the secret club that you become part of after like losing a parent is just so much bigger. And the advice that you get, one thing that I always remember was also the same. There was just so much happened the day that my dad passed. I was actually with Antonio Caro, who's the producer for this podcast that we do, and we were talking to an author. And the book that we had just finished called The Quince Project that we're interviewing her on was about loss and death and grief. And it was, and it's a young adult book. And I'm just like, every time that I would pick up a book or something, it felt like the universe was bringing in these topics to help me digest it and learn, you know, like expand my community a little bit more. But this woman who I had just met 45 minutes before this, you know, we interviewed her on this podcast, just gave me so much knowledge and love. And she checked in with me that day. And that was the same day that my dad passed. Like we went out for the walk, we came back, like we did this interview, like, and I just felt like I was part of this bigger club. And she was the first person that told me about the relief that comes with hearing like their last breath. And I was administering my dad's morphine throughout the night. So I was sleeping in the living room right next to his bedroom. And te lo juro, like I woke up, it was like 2:40 something in the morning, and I heard his last breath, and I knew it was his last breath. And like it was just this like very chilling moment of like, oh wait, like this is something. There is this sense of like relief that comes with like knowing that he's no longer in pain, because my dad was in pain for a very, very long time, and he held on so long. But like hearing his last breath, it was just like, ya puede descansar en paz, right? Like it was just, but like not only him, but like all of us too, that he's no longer actively in pain.
And besides the pain, Adrian, I want to add that them being scared is what really hits me. Like the pain, they're superhuman to us as children a lot of times, or at least they were at one point as when we were children, and they become very vulnerable in different stages of their lives. But what worried me about my mom and what worries me about my dad is when they look scared.
Yeah.
And to be able to wake up and be scared all day long with what's next. And so beyond the pain, it's because my dad really isn't in pain right now. But I remember talking to him where he said, Hijo, me estoy muriendo, Toñito, me estoy muriendo. And he just kept repeating. I remember calling Alejandra right afterwards because it haunted me. And since then, the guys come back over and over again. And so those extra innings are continuing. But that was really what hit me, was to see someone that you love, someone that you admire, somebody that you saw as a source of strength be scared. And Yvette, how about you?
Wow, you said something that just, struck a chord, being scared. So the night of the CHCI gala, she fell, and I had to fly to LaGuardia. I got to the hospital at 12:30 a.m. She's claustrophobic, and she was in a room the size of a box. And when she saw me through the glass, she was in isolation. She's real little. She's like 4'11". When I saw her little eyes, peering through the glass, I'm like, this is everything. This is everything. This is life. This is everything. And they wouldn't let me go in because I had to put on the gown and the mask, goggles. I said, guys, I have glasses. Leave me alone. And when I went in there and I hugged her, I could not let her go. And I said, this is why I'm here. You talk about the expectation. She expected me to be there. I know she didn't say it, but who was going to hug her? Who was going to wipe her butt? Who was going to wipe her tears? Who was going to be there? She was in isolation like an animal. Nobody was in there. With all these machines, and she had an IV, and her arms were bruised. So the expectation for her, but unfortunately, all of her life has always been me, 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 me. And it's exhausting, but I take the punches because I guess I'm the daughter, right? And since my brother had made his decision to go away, That was the expectation. Las tías y las primas, expectations expect me to do it, right? And then my guilt. I have lived with guilt my entire life. When I left New York to go to Chicago to work at Sears in 1996, and she was diabetic, and I left her and the nephew Giovanni that I raised. Oh my God, on the plane, I cried and cried and cried and cried. And she goes, Mija, no te apures. Ve y supérate. Go to Chicago. I will be there. When the moving truck got there, my mother and my nephew were at my door in Chicago. So you see, you give and take a little bit. The expectation, the guilt. When I got married, I spent the first Christmas without my husband, my first Christmas as a married woman, because she needed an emergency surgery. I said, sorry, Lázaro Superman, guess what? My mom needs me. I left him in Chicago, and I spent my birthday, December 23rd, and Christmas in the hospital with her surgery. So, the guilt, that I left New York, that has never left me. But like I tell her, Mami, yo nunca te he dejado, I love you. And I keep reminding her, I love you, I'm your daughter, I love you, because I think in this state, they need to hear it, and they need the human interaction. Yo le paso la mano, I comb her hair. It's like a child, but I still live with the guilt. I left her. But I will tell you, no matter where I am, I call her Bionic Mommy, because since I left, she's had over 12 surgeries. I've counted them. And so I am there when she needs me. I am there on the phone. I am there to take the punches, literally the punches, but I'm there. But I still no he superado the guilt. I don't know how to get that out of my system.
So
And look,
I'm going to jump in for a second.
Just shout out Lázaro, because the importance of having a supportive partner,
Yes.
and I know how much he means to you. Go ahead, Ale.
No, I was going to say that I know this may not mean much, but I want you to know that you have earned the right and the license to shed all that guilt, because you're my hero. You're my hero today. I know you, and I know how much the pressures of our jobs and the pressures of our culture. I wanted to just also say, we are of the generation where we were told to compartmentalize. You got to put your profession in a little box, your family in a little box. You don't mingle any one of them. What I love about this younger generation is that they don't compartmentalize. They bring it all in. And when I learned how to do that, and I brought my mother into my full life, now everybody knows. They ask me, how's mom doing, right? You invite people to help you lift that weight. Even with the story of my father, I used to hide it. Now I tell people, because I never know in the room who needs to know, who needs to hear that we can survive a loved one who has committed suicide. So I just wanted to acknowledge, Yvette, that what you're doing is beautiful beyond belief. I know it's hard, but that is why our culture is so amazing. My mother usually says that the number one illness in America is loneliness, because so many people are in the hospital, and you see it. They're lonely in the hospital. They don't have anyone que le agarre la mano, que le pase. That's not us, and we have to preserve that, because I know we're all far away, but the fact that we can jump on a plane and be at the hospital and hold our loved one tight and give them the medication, that's the gift. And I think that Tony, I can't thank you enough. This was the universe telling me I needed this podcast.
Same here.
Let's talk about advice that we would give to somebody that is either at the end, like Adrian was, and what to do after, because that's what I remember from our conversation on that plane ride, that you were like, I want to put a checklist together. How do I do that so people can understand what they're about to deal with at some point? And I know that AARP has amazing resources that we will be sharing as part of this podcast. But I also, for someone that is dealing with what Yvette's dealing at that stage, someone that's dealing with what Alejandra's dealing with, and that's the reason I wanted the four of us on here. This was a curated group that I know really well. So selfishly, I wanted people that I have a relationship with. So I'll start with the advice because I'm part of this group too, even though I'm hosting it. I'm going to mention things that I know that I can definitely say to someone that I had gone through, because I'm at both stages. I lost a parent, and I'm very close to losing another one. And that is, tie up those loose ends for your own sake with your parents. I don't care what it is that happened. For your own sake, make sure that you don't have anything left to say, and you don't have anything left to hear, even if you pull it out of them. Make sure you're hearing what you need to hear, so that you're not going to carry this with you. Because, like I said earlier, they will be gone. You are staying here, and you are going to impact other generations through what you're going through. And then the other thing is, don't let anyone mess with your grieving process. I would go and visit my mom once a year at her gravesite. My sister was going once a week and would wear her clothes and have her materials all over her house, decorating her house that were my mom's things. I couldn't. My brother went a whole nother route in terms of dealing with it a very different way. So that trichotomy, I guess, instead of a dichotomy, with the same situation for three people, we all handled that grieving process differently. And I also felt love from both my parents, and I feel it so strongly from my dad. No matter what it is that led up to here, I feel so fortunate that I always felt love from my parents under any circumstances, even when they were not perfect. I never felt as though I didn't have that love from them, and that's the greatest thing as a child that you could feel. And it's reciprocal, because you want them to feel that love. And as Yvette said, even if your mommy is not even fully conscious, she feels that love. And Adrian, your papi did too. And Alejandra, I know your mom feels it from you, because I have watched you adapt your entire life to supporting her. And what you said to Yvette earlier about earning that ability to shed all of the guilt that you could possibly have, you've done that. I've watched you do it. And then the last thing is the importance of checking in with people and allowing yourself to be checked in on. We've done it with each other for many years. Alejandra, over the years, there's a reason why we're still close, and we check in. How's mommy doing? How are your nieces doing? How's the grandchild doing? And you call me and say, how's your papi doing? Please tell him I said hello. And the same thing with you, Adrian, since we were on that trip. And over the years, I've known you since you first got to DC in your early 20s, and we've stayed in touch. There's a reason for it. And Yvette, it's deeper than seeing you at events. I count on you as a friend. And when we were doing this podcast, I was like, we've got to get Yvette on here, because I know what she's been dealing with. I need Alejandra on there, and I need Adrian to provide his light to whatever it is we're doing. So let's go around the room, starting with Alejandra, in terms of what advice do you have for someone? Then I want to go to Yvette, and then we'll finish it with Adrian, who just went through the passing of a parent and can put together that checklist, Adrian, that you wanted to develop. So you're going to have a chance to right now. Ale?
I think the checklist is great on so many levels. You know, I'm a planner, so I've already started to downsize my mom. So I got rid of her condo. She's now living with me because I know that process of having lost a parent and then having to deal with all the things, I know that for me would be too hard. So I've started that. But I love the idea of a checklist. I also love the idea of don't mess with people's grieving, because everyone grieves differently. But here's the other thing I think we are missing and we're losing. I am of the generation where my mother took me to funerals, right, to pay respect. And there's nothing more amazing than when you sit in community. And I think that we also need to start, telling our younger generation how important the passage of time and the passing of generation is. Because I'm not counting on, my nieces or nephews, because I don't want to put that burden on them. But I do believe that as we help our younger generation understand what life is about, these hard moments cannot be done alone. We have to bring the generations in so that we don't suffer what my mother says is the illness of America, which is loneliness. So that's what I would say. Bring in the community, and we need to continue to check in on each other, because it's a beautiful thing, but it's also letting go of all that weight and guilt.
Beautiful. Yvette?
Yes. One big word that you and Adrian have said is the word forgiveness. I cannot tell you how in a weekend I have forgiven the distance of my father over 20 years and my brother 35. I think I had to start there. It's been a very emotional time, but I feel more grounded with forgiveness. My mother hasn't been perfect either. I've beyond forgiven her, because if not, I wouldn't be doing what I do. But Antonio, I know you're going to give, the AARP resources, but the first thing, when you look at caregiving is you have to make a plan. You have to put it together before your loved one gets to that end state. I will tell you that I have sized up the situation. I know exactly what my mother wants because I said it when I opened. She wants cremation. She doesn't want to be put in a box. She wants her ashes spread. And you know what's important? We have to respect their wishes. She stated this to the family before she had dementia. So I feel very respectful is very important. Finding the support system and starting the conversation. I've had it with my aunts and my cousins and some friends. Alejandra has known my caregiving story since I met you 9 years ago. And Tony has known it as well, because I always talk about her and my aunts. But very important to start that conversation, because that's how you find the support. It takes a village. Just like it is, when you're raising a child, it's the same way when you're caregiving for a parent, because they become the child and you become the parent. So you got to form that team, because without that team, it's not going to work for you. And then self-care. You have to care for yourself. Alejandra and I have practiced a day of Zen, a day of Zumba, a day of doing a spa. You have to find the time to go exercise, to walk, to read a book, to hear our podcast, something, because you have to really find some levity in what you're doing. Caregiving is a full-time job. There are people that do caregiving full-time and they cannot hold a job. So those are some of the things. I'd like to end with self-care, 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 because if we are not well, we cannot be the best caregivers to our loved ones that we can be.
Beautiful. Adrian.
Just so much knowledge and love in this conversation. It feels so beautiful. It just feels so timely and important. And I'm so happy. Thank you, Tony, for bringing us together and say, plus everything that folks said. I also want us to get in a better place about grief you have to go through it. We're so obsessed with this fix-it culture and healing culture, but part of that process is just sitting in grief and just letting and just extending yourself the same grace that you would extend a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old who just cannot handle and process their emotions. You just have to go through it, and it's going to look different for different people, and there is no way to fix it, and it comes at random times. I could listen to a song and all of a sudden, similar to you, Tony, I'm just I could shut down and cry, and it just or it could bring happy tears, and you just have to go through it. You can't fix it. And we need to get out of this idea of trying to fix things that, that don't need to be fixed, because it's not a bad thing. Grief is also a good, you're human. It'd be weird if I didn't cry during this podcast. My dad died in April. It'd be weird if I wasn't crying. Right. And in terms of the checklist, some really quick pointers. folks, get your parents' phone and update that contact list, because fulano this, fulana that, like, it is so hard to know who are the people that need to be notified on things, especially when I don't, like, to this day, I have a tia Yogi. I don't know what her real name is. Like, I don't, like, but that's the way it is saved in my mom's phone, and we had to notify her. and that is, but like, as like, do it now that, you know, if your parents are in like good mind, just to, like, it's an easy step that trust me, you'll appreciate it when you cross that bridge. But also, like, similar to like Yvette, like, those key decisions need to be made ideally with the person, so that way they know what their plan is. So that way, if they want to be cremated, like for me, my dad, he wanted to go to Mexico. We couldn't send him there, so we had him cremated as well. And we're going to take his ashes there next year, so that way he could go see La Virgen and just, you know, do one last and bury his ashes there. Also, like, I think it's come up a lot, but like, ask for support and build your community. Like for me, I became obsessed with making sure that my plants stay alive, like, during this process. So I had my neighbors come, like, and I don't know why I became so fixated on that. Like, I needed my plants to survive. And despite the hard efforts of my boyfriend trying to overwater them, they survived this entire period. But I had to, like, ask my neighbors to come in and do it. Also, pull all the photos now. Do it as an exercise with your parents while they're alive, so that way you could see them together and you could, like, relive those memories, and it's going to spark a lot of good conversation. But you could, you know, it was something that we did where we just had albums and albums of photos that we went through together. It just led to some really, really beautiful conversations, and similarly, it helped ignite some good memories, and it became like some sort of game. And then we, you know, write the obituary when they're still alive too. I know it's a very cathartic experience, but like, it's important because there's just so many gaps that need to be filled and data points that need to be collected, that when you're once they pass, like, it's really hard to kind of get to be in that mindset and know who you need to notify, what the notices look like, and what the obituary should be. But those were some of the things that kind of helped me. Like, granted, I was very fortunate enough to be able to take time off of work, and I did take time off of work, and I really recommend that because it's hard to manage. This becomes a full-time job. But my dad was awake 4 hours out of the day, which meant the rest of the day was planning his funeral and being able to do this.
What about the financial part, Adrian?
Oh,
do we
God,
have to
yeah.
save for the funeral expenses and everything?
I come from a very traditional, like, Mexican family as well. So, like, we were, the expectation that family always pitches in was there too. So that was helpful, but we didn't rely on that. But we slowly, when we found out that he was passing, we did, we hired an attorney and switched on over, like, the power of attorney. So that way it was in me and my brother's name for both medical and finances. And we started, it came so quickly. There is a smarter process to go through to make sure that, you know, a lot of their assets don't hit them and count towards, like, state aid, which I think, like, Yvette or someone else could talk better about it.
Yeah, no, that's a part of it. It's tough. So as I'm wrapping up, the number of Hispanic adults 65 and older has nearly tripled since 2000, reaching about 5 million in 2020. By 2060, that number is projected to quadruple to almost 20 million. By 2060, which is projected 21% of the older population will be Latino. So you're going to have to deal with this at some point. And I'm very grateful to Adrian, Yvette, Alejandra for being so forthcoming with there's power and vulnerability. And this is an example of that power being exhibited, to be able to build community, even if it's over a podcast. And I want to shout out also Antonio Caro, who, when you gave me that compliment about the opening, he's the one who wrote it. All I did was read it. So I just want to give him credit. So to close this out, if we could have, and I'll start with me again, because I am part of this panel, not just hosting it. What food, music, or smells bring you comfort that remind you of your parents? So I'll give you an example. Food, nacatamal, even just smelling it immediately makes me think of my dad and growing up as a little boy in Nicaragua, or gallo pinto. And on my mom's side, because she was Paraguaya, it's chipas or sopa paraguaya. That is such a unique taste and an area that isn't necessarily known to the rest of the world in terms of their cuisine, like some of the foods from the countries that we all come from. And then music. My mom would always sing that song, and just before she died, actually, she said to us, "Adios, muchachos," that song. And to this day, that makes me get paralyzed with grief all over again, because she actually sang that song when she was at the end. And one of the few things that she said after she had already been in hospice for a while. And my dad, it's just that Nicaraguan song, soy puro pinolero, nicaragüense por gracias a Dios. And so those songs really hit me in a different way, because they're also songs that represent when they were young, and kind of tie me back to connecting with them at a different stages of their lives. And the smells, fabuloso, the purple one. Somewhere, somebody was using it in Lampazo and cleaning the floors, and you didn't have rugs in Nicaragua or Paraguay, so those smells made you feel like I'm walking into a clean space. And then also this weird thing, as soon as I would get off the plane in Nicaragua, whatever, even if it was just 5 years ago, the last time I was there, you immediately smell something burning, and it smells like you're back in your home country. Whether it's leña or whether it's basura or whatever it is, but there's this smell of something burning somewhere in Nicaragua as soon as you get off the airplane, and you're just like, I'm back home. So let's go to Yvette in terms of what's food, music, or smells that remind you of your mom or of your dad at some point, that comfort you.
Oh my God, how I love this. My father is Old Spice. When he would walk in the door or he would leave, the Old Spice. You knew when the man was in the house, you knew when he was coming back home. The Old Spice. My mother's fragrance was the Oscar de la Renta, the original Oscar de la Renta. To this day, she likes to put the Palmer's cocoa butter. So anytime I smell cocoa butter, I smell her. The food, because every Sunday, this was the meal after church, los tres golpes dominicanos, the mangú, the salchichón, and the huevo frito with the pickled onions. Anytime I smell that anywhere, I go to the table with my mom, my brother, and her eating after church on Sunday. And then when my parents got divorced when I was 8. And so there is this amazing singer from way back when. Her name is Blanca Rosa Gil. And she had this song. You know how the women's anthem, I Will Survive? Mm-hmm. Well, Blanca Rosa Gil had one for women. I'm not a singer, but I'm going to sing a little piece.
Come on, I sang.
It goes, hacia adelante, yo viviré hacia adelante. And then it says, siento la dueña de mí, hoy que de nuevo nací, en mí florece el amor. So it was like an empowerment anthem. My mother would wake up, go to bed. That song was scratched. She would put it on. For those who are old enough to remember, La Radiola with the record. So those are sweet memories that I think at her funeral I'll have to play that song. That's her I Will Survive song.
Oh my goodness, we are so going to have a reel of Yvette's food, music, and smells. You brought it. All right, Alejandra.
So, as you mentioned, I'm kind of in between as well. In terms of my dad, I remember the joy he would have of eating the caña de azúcar, the purple one, like literally a sugar cane, and just chewing on it. It was like a pastime of his that he loved, as well as the cologne. He used to use Vetiver, which was a cologne, which I still smell it. We didn't talk about smells, but smells for me are a time machine. I smell something and it takes me. My grandmother is sofrito. When I smell sofrito, I remember my grandmother's hands. With my mother, I got to give a shout out because I spoke about one of my brothers and I didn't talk about the other, which is my brother Gabriel. My mother, look, it's the casino. my brother Gabriel's job is to make sure that my mother has money in the bank, so she goes to the casino. And why? Because when she's in the casino, she drops her cane and she's walking and she's happy. She's like a kid in Chuck E. Cheese. So I love those moments when I have memories of my parents, and I'm sure you do too, when they were happy. Unapologetically happy. Because again, I want to give grace and I want to honor. They too had a very hard life. And I am who I am because of who they are and who they were. And I can't tease it out. I can't, divorce one piece from another. It's the totality of life that is so amazing.
And music?
And music, oh my gosh. Adios muchachos, compañero de mi vida. I mean, that's a quintessential song, and my mother sings it all. So,
is that right?
My mother sings it all, and my father loved music. When he passed away, we had collections of the big vinyl, all of it. I can get transported when I hear any one of those songs. So that's where my love for music comes from.
And you love music, Adrian.
Yeah. No, one thing that Alejandra that sparked me is just when I was coming around to figuring out what forgiveness looked like with me and my dad, it was just because of him I'm alive, right? And you gave me the greatest gift that regardless of what our relationship was, I am here because of you, and because of that, I know the beauty of hugs. I'm able to eat chocolate. I'm able to experience all these beautiful things because of this. And you might not have been in this life, you might not have been the dad that I wanted, but in another life, I'm sure you were the dad that I wanted. But this is just the path that we had. So it just sparked that. I just wanted to share that. But for me, it's definitely Los Bukis. I feel like we play it it was he always convinced himself that he looked like Marco Antonio Solis. So he would the picture of my baptism, he's just like, oh, go get me the photo where I look like Marco Antonio Solis. And me and my brother would just be so mean and be like, which photo? You never look like him. We don't know what you're talking about. But I think it's, just even listening to it now, I'm just like, oh yeah, it's so my dad. But one of the more touching songs that we played a lot towards the end that I feel like I finally understood the lyrics to is Mexico Querido y Lindo. And it's the Ana Gabriel version that we were playing a lot for him towards the end. But the lyrics goes like, Mexico Querido y Lindo, si muero lejos de ti, que me digan que estoy dormido y que me traigan a ti. If I die, tell me that I'm sleeping so that way you could bring me back. And this love that we have for country is just something so beautiful that I finally understood where he was coming from, because he really loved Mexico. And I think that song really captured it. But I also want to gift one thing to Yvette and Alejandra. I think another thing about our culture that makes talking about grief and dying a little bit more beautiful and easier to process is there's this very famous saying that I became obsessed with during this whole process, but it was te acompaño en tu dolor. And it just feels so much better than saying that I'm sorry, but it's just I'm with you during this journey of grief. So I just want to offer that up.
I love that. Y te acompaño en tu dolor.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Adrian, Yvette, Alejandra, and everyone involved with this podcast. This is a special one. Thank you, AARP, for making sure that we're sharing these moments with our entire community. And I appreciate everyone and all these sentiments and all these advice and the spirit of coming forward again with power in vulnerability. So thanks everyone very much. Que Dios le bendiga.